Welcome to Web Accessibility 101. Transform your site for all users. Watch closely because Shakira Damji can help you make a few changes that will blow up your analytics. Your web design can make or break user experience, and some mistakes can prevent 20% of the market from even being able to read or use your website. What makes a web page accessible? What do good UX designers know that most product managers and designers don't? The best websites follow some simple accessibility rules, and this webinar will walk you through them all. Joining us live from London is Shakira Damji, Head of Product Design at Semble. We're starting right now.
I don't know what happened here. What was that? What was that?
Oh
But we
my
are here. We
God.
are here with you live. This is live streaming, guys. Everyone, I apologize. Okay, I'm going to sing you Shakira, Shakira again because it was such a cute moment and we just missed it and we didn't see the smile on your face because something strange that happened here online. So I hope that this little surprise made you smile. I don't know, as a 90s girl, this song comes to my
Love
mind
it.
whenever I think about Shakira. I'm sure I'm not the first one. Shakira Damji, thank you so much for joining us here today. What's up?
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to share my knowledge with the Product League community. So yeah, I can get right into it.
Very excited to have you here with us today. We are just about to start. We already have a few comments in from the audience, which is great. We have Alicia here saying, "Hi, Alicia here. I have a question before we even start. Should product managers really be worrying about accessibility, or this is more of a designer responsibility? I'm not trying to provoke anyone. I truly wonder about this. Thank you so much. We also have Amanda joining from New Jersey. Saying AI is everywhere these days. How do you think it will shake up web accessibility in the next few years? Everyone, bring on the questions. Like, it's
These are
not
great
every
questions.
day that you meet Shakira Damji, the head of product at Semble, for answering all the questions that you may have. At the closing of the talk, we'll actually have some time for a Q&A. So bring on the questions, everyone. Bring on your wonders, all your thoughts about web accessibility. Shakira is here to answer everything that you want and need to know. Don't worry about that. Now, this is Shakira Damji. This is that's so confusing because you're on the other side. It's all mirroring. So this is Shakira Damji. I'm Maria Cassis. This is Product League, and we want to get to know you better, everyone. So please type in your name. Where is it that you are from? What is it that you do? So we'll know how to better address the questions and the answers that we will deliver, that Shakira will here deliver. I'm just supporting here, and make sure to turn this into our little product party. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Shakira, thank you so much for being here. Are you ready?
I am,
We're
yes. I
starting
am
right
ready.
now.
Amazing. Perfect. Perfect. So, getting started with accessibility. Just a quick intro to start off with. So, my name is Shakira. I currently work as the head of design at a company called Semble. So, we make software for healthcare professionals. We have over 1,500 healthcare companies using our software in the UK, and we have tens of thousands of patients accessing information and documents sent via our system. Before that, I worked at Citizens Advice alongside designers from the Government Digital Service in the UK to rebuild their design system. This project improved the accessibility of over 2,000 advice articles, and this was critical because Citizens Advice is a charity in the UK and many of their service users have a registered disability. In the past, I've also worked on projects for the NHS, the British Heart Foundation, and other charities as well. I just wanted to start by talking a bit about why accessibility matters to me and why it's such an integral part of my ethos as a designer. So, when I was around 6, my mum was diagnosed with a condition called neurofibromatosis. Unfortunately, ongoing treatment led to a stroke, and she became fully paralysed on the right hand side of her body. Because she was a single parent, growing up, I faced all the same barriers as her, and I saw how she overcame them. Sometimes it was just through sheer grit, but most of the time it was by using adaptations and equipment. As a child, I was fascinated by all the cool things she had that helped her do everything from using a computer to getting into the bath or opening the lids on jars. The social model of disability is something that's really important to me, especially because of my experience growing up. A person isn't disabled by their condition, but by the barriers they face in everyday life. If we as designers and product people can work to lower those barriers, we can create better products, not just for disabled people, but for everyone. Because, of course, accessibility is usability and vice versa. You can't have one without the other. For example, easily tabbing through a form isn't just for disabled people, it helps everyone complete their tasks faster. Having an interface that's easy to see isn't just helpful for partially sighted people, but also someone who has eye strain or someone working in a brightly lit room. Everyone experiences temporary and situational disabilities. So I found in my experience it's not really hard getting people to agree to all of that. Of course, we want to make our products better. Of course, we care about disabled people having equal access to systems. But when we're dealing with all of the hundreds of things we have to deal with every day, we have time pressures and tech debt, figuring out where to start can be really overwhelming. So that's what this presentation is about, giving you all a few really practical places to start and hopefully a bit of a playbook for bringing some of this into your processes. So when it comes to accessibility for the web, the place to start is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, particularly in the UK. Although these guidelines are incredibly useful, they are quite dense and they can be difficult to understand. So each country usually does have their own kind of version of this, but they're very much the same kind of core. If you do want to delve into these, there are actually lots of websites out there that break them down into more understandable language. I have a list of resources I can share after this presentation. One really important thing to note before we go any further is accessibility isn't just design, it's actually shared between designers, developers, and content. So, what actually are in these guidelines? The guidelines are broken down into 4 main sections. So, the first is perceivable. It means information is visible to me in the way that I need it to be. For example, all text is in a color that's high enough contrast to read easily. The second is operable. I can interact with everything in the way that I need to. So, not everyone could use a mouse or a trackpad. Disabled people often use what's called assistive technologies, and being able to do everything using a keyboard only is critical for assistive technologies to work effectively. Understandable. So I can easily understand what I need to do on the system, so there isn't a high cognitive load. For example, easy, clear to understand error messages. And finally, robust. The code is well written, so any assistive technologies such as screen readers or screen magnifiers can access the website and transform it into an accessible format. For example, any form labels you have are correctly associated with their input fields. Together, they spell the acronym POUR, which will hopefully make them a little bit easier to understand. So now you have an understanding of the 4 main sections. I've cherry-picked some of the most important criteria from each section to start off with. So let's start with a few basic rules for designers. Font size isn't actually part of the guidelines, it's just best practice, and it's a basic principle for good design. So what we want to do is make sure fonts are big enough for people to read. Ideally, that's 16 pixels and above. I work on quite dense software interfaces, so I do use 14 occasionally, but that is the absolute minimum. Also, make sure your text is responsive. So when someone zooms into the page, it gets bigger without pixelating. So that means it should be properly coded and styled using CSS rather than using images of text. The next is color contrast. Despite this being extremely easy to resolve, it's actually one of the most prominent accessibility issues on the web. The guidelines state that text should meet a ratio of 4:5, buttons, form inputs, and any other interactive element should be 3:1. So these ratios may look a little abstract, but there are hundreds of tools out there that use your color codes to calculate these in seconds. And they're really important because they're used to measure whether text or interactive elements are visible enough against the background. It's important to note that contrast isn't just for text, it's equally important on a form, for example, to be able to see where the inputs are. So you can see here, my lovely dark background and white text is a ratio of 13 to 79, which is much higher than 4:5, so I know I've easily passed. First thing to do is check your color palette or color language. Do the colors used for your text and UI components pass these ratios? If not, make them a little darker or lighter, depending on your background color. You're going to hear me say this many times, but keyboard operability really forms the foundations of accessible products. If you get this right, it's much easier for the rest to then fall into place. What does keyboard operability actually mean? So it means that I can use the tab and arrow keys on a website to navigate through and complete my tasks without needing a mouse. One of the most important things is being able to see where you're focused. Browsers do have focus states that come out of the box, but they often aren't visible enough. So the best practice is to design a focus state set outside the element so you can clearly see where you are on the interface. What should you do? Design a focus state for each component, and ideally this would form part of your design system. Now, developers. As I mentioned previously, keyboard operability is the foundation of accessibility. If you get this part right, the rest falls into place. So to make sure your application is keyboard accessible, you need to answer yes to the following 3 questions. Can all tasks be completed using the keyboard only? Can you always see where the focus is? Does the focus move in a predictable order? So you need to make sure not to do things like changing the focus order without testing it just to make sure it makes sense. I've got an example here from Gov, which is always a really good website to look at for best practice. Perfect. And then next is headings. So as all designers already know, headings are really important. They help people instantly understand the hierarchy and structure of information on a page. If headings are used properly, even the most complex topic can be made understandable. Now imagine you can't see the headings because you're blind or partially sighted. How do you understand the information on the page? It's simple. If the headings are marked up in the code properly, assistive technologies will understand them in the same way. So mark them up properly and use them in the right hierarchy. Don't skip from a H2 straight to a H4, then use a H1. Best practice for accessibility is best practice for a reason. So it impacts many things, including overall usability, and also coding something in a robust way future-proofs your product. So I just wanted to touch on the hottest topic at the moment, which is AI, particularly AI support tools. These work in much the same way as assistive technologies. The AI will do a much better job of understanding your product and producing the best answers if it can understand the structure of your content. And finally, form labels and hint text. Rule 1, don't use placeholders. The grey text inside an input, they look messy, they have low contrast, they don't play well with assistive technologies, and they disappear when you click into the field, so the information contained in them is really easily forgotten. If you need to give the user more information, use hint text placed below the form label. And so this is the code part. You need to make sure that the label and the hint text are correctly connected to the input field in the code. So you can see here with the matching IDs that I've color coded. This means that if someone is using voice input software, they can say enter national insurance number. The assistive tech will know how to focus them in the right field. This is important for accessibility, but it's also just best practice for writing clean HTML. Finally, content. So when it comes to error messages, stopping the user from making a mistake in the first place is always better than an error message. You can see an example here on the left, which is a library you can use to detect misspelled emails. When you do need them, error messages should be understandable out of context, specific, helpful, and informative. They also don't need pleasantries such as please and thank you, because that's doing nothing to help the user resolve their issue. You should also use an error summary at the top of the page to summarize all the errors so that they can be easily addressed. This seems really obvious, but it often gets missed. When you're a startup and you're doing things quickly, there isn't always time to capture every single error message in the designs. So what I've done in the past is created some guidelines that are visible to everyone, upskilled anyone who might need to write error messages, so this includes product people and engineers, and tried to make sure any outliers are caught during our QA process. So yeah, that's it basically. That's it for the guidelines. This is a quick recap of what I covered. So we've got color contrast and focus states for designers, developers, making stuff keyboard accessible, and using headings correctly, properly associating form labels and hint text, and finally content, writing good error messages. Doing these things are a really great place to start when making your product more accessible. Now, how do you actually go about doing it? So the best advice I can give you is making sure you have a solid design system. This is the place where design, tech, and content really come together. Also, I truly believe that with all the AI tools of the future, having a robust design system will help automate building applications whilst also ensuring a high quality output that's both accessible and on brand. One thing to note is it's much easier building accessibility in from the ground up than trying to retrofit it afterwards. And a design system is a really great place to start because of this. If some of you are thinking, I don't have the option of doing that, I work on an established product, don't worry, the same advice applies, but you just need to approach it slightly differently. So when I joined Semble, we were an established product and we were actually using multiple different component libraries for the front end. None of them were good for accessibility. You could tell right away because the components didn't have good contrast. You can operate them using keyboard. The libraries also had very limited customization capabilities, so you couldn't even change some of the colors they used. We didn't have the time, and also, to be honest, didn't really want to build a library from scratch when there's so much already out there. So I did a short procurement process with the front-end developers. We assessed a few different libraries known for being good for accessibility. The one we decided to choose was Shakira UI. So Shakira forms the majority of our components, but we also add from other libraries if it doesn't have what we need. And together, these form the building blocks of Semble UI, our design system. I developed an accessible color language. We applied this to our components and we started rolling Semble UI out bit by bit in app. Whenever we build a new feature or we replace an existing one, we use our new components. It's been around 2 years. We've got 50% coverage and counting, but Semble is a very, very complex tool. So yeah, it's a work in progress. We did a mini accessibility audit recently on some of our most complex components. Although we didn't fully pass, it was a really good start, and the auditors were able to complete all tasks. And the majority of the assistive technologies they used had no major issues. So yeah, it's a really good start. In order to get buy-in for all of this, you will need to become an educator. Actually, just knowing the steps and what to do is usually not the hardest part. The hardest part is convincing people that it's worth spending the time on. And really, to do that, you need to become an educator. You need to find your champions, and you need to use any forum that you have to teach people about the importance of accessibility. I just wanted to add in a few of my favorite arguments, which are: you can't be a company that values usability if you aren't thinking about accessibility alongside. It's not an add-on, it's part of the work that we do every day to create user-friendly designs and build a robust code base. For public sector and government products, meeting WCAG AA standards in the UK is law. So knowing this, are we comfortable saying it's not a priority? My final tip is, if you can't get buy-in, just do it anyway. Find the people in your company who are champions, and oftentimes you can wrap it up as something else. So for example, the way we did it, which was we baked it into our design system and we made it about sort of operational efficiencies as well as improvements to accessibility and usability. What I've covered today is just the start. There's so much more to accessibility, and of course, you can't have a truly accessible product without involving disabled people along the way. This could be involving them in user research and user testing, working with an auditing agency, or hiring disabled people to work on your teams. With the recent government changes in the UK to benefits, and also the revolution we have in AI and machine learning, it's more important than ever to allow equal access to the systems that we build. So yes, thanks for listening, and any questions?
This was great. Thank you so much for everything that you shared with us, Shakira. All the tips, all the know how. And actually, you somewhat already answered some of the great questions submitted in the chat, but we still can provide the audience with some more know-how, because I know that you have so much to share. Before we dive to the questions, I want to remind everyone how the algorithm works. So please click and hit the like button, subscribe, send it to your manager, whoever needs to watch this video and make tomorrow's website more accessible, send it to them, because we want to make the world a better place. Not just saying that, but actually making better products, right? Making better websites. So thank you for that. And I do want to thank you for opening up to us and sharing your own experiences and your own story. As someone in the chat say, it was so inspiring, because we always say that we have to focus on the user behind everything that we build. But when you bring this personal touch, it takes the whole experience into something else. So thank you so much for opening up and sharing this with us. And we have some great questions. Are you ready?
I am, I think so.
Let's do that. So we have John saying, we've all messed up on accessibility at some point. What are the biggest blunders you've seen, and how can we catch them early in design? This
That's
is
a
a good
great
one.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the biggest blunders are just the most obvious ones for me. Like, the thing that really annoys me the most is super low contrast, and also just not having like the keyboard accessibility in place. As I said when I first joined the company, this is the first thing that I noticed about all of the components we were using. I was like, these don't have high enough contrast. And yeah, you can tell immediately. So I think the biggest blunders are just the simplest ones. And also with contrast, it's the simplest one to fix as well. We did a really big rebrand, and we had loads of great feedback. And yeah, that rebrand was off, like honestly, just making the colors more legible. So yeah.
A very good reason, one of the best reasons of all to do a rebrand. Absolutely. Thank you for that. We're moving on to another question. This one coming from Jill, and she's asking, Agile moves fast, but accessibility needs attention. Any tips on waving accessibility testing
Mm.
into our sprints without slowing things down? Now, what I loved, one of the things I love the most about your presentation is you always said, okay, we have designers, we have product managers, we have developers. Like, you know, the ecosystem within the office. You understand that we also need to keep the developers in mind and we can slow things down. So, how do we do that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So there are QA frameworks. I think there's Axe, it's called, and it works with Cypress. I'm not technical, so I can't go into too much detail about this, but you can definitely look it up. And it kind of just bakes in accessibility to the normal QA process. So these accessibility errors will come up as they're QAing. I think slowing things down is a really good point. For us, if I said you have to resolve every single accessibility issue in order to deploy, like that just isn't realistic, to be honest, for how we need to build products. But what we did do is set like a base level of acceptance around some of the things we do need to resolve. And then the rest of them, at least the team is upskilling and understanding what they mean. And I think that's the first step, is just getting everyone looking at those, understanding what they mean, and then that gets you on the right track to fully start addressing them in future. So we're now have gotten to the point where we do have engineers and QAs who are accessibility champions. They're really interested in this stuff. It's come from them. It's like kind of grassroots, and I think that's how the best stuff usually starts. And they go about working on this stuff themselves and fixing it, resolving it, and teaching other people. So yeah, it's kind of step by step, getting the word out there, not making it seem like a huge barrier. And there are a lot of accessibility tools around that will fit into your development processes.
I love that. So, you build your accessibility ambassadors team.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what they're called. Yeah.
Loving that. Thank you, Shakira. We're moving on to another question. This one comes from Amanda, and she's asking, AI is everywhere these days. How do you think it will shake up web accessibility in the next few years?
Yeah, it's a really good question. There is, I think I read an article, just about the Chat GPT interface and how many accessibility issues it has. And it goes to show like every one of us are using these tools all the time. It's accessibility is super important if we want to live in an equitable world. Like we all need to understand what accessibility means. With these new products, particularly stuff like Lovable and, these products that spit out a lot of code, because they're machines and they sort of work through stuff in a very, in the proper way. I did
In
actually
a
test
rigid way,
Lovable.
yeah.
Yeah, I did test Lovable, and it seemed all right, to be fair, from like some of the basic bits and bobs. So I think I'm hoping it will make it easier and it will make it faster to build accessible products. But I think as a team, we need to understand what that looks like so that we can catch it when it isn't happening. So instead of it being like a huge, huge effort and it being super manual, I'm hoping it can become more of just like an understanding and something that we can look out for. And maybe we can even start really testing with disabled people and taking it to the next level where we're not just checking boxes, building code that should just be built like that. We're actually making experiences that are really brilliant and work for people.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Another question is coming from Karthik. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. If any B2C product like fintech is missing to follow accessibility guideline, what will happen or what is the impact? What do you think? So, B2C, fintech, or something that has regulatory implications to it.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I only know that it is the law for government and public sector bodies in the UK, the implications for them is they can be sued, basically. So they can be taken to court and they can be sued. For fintech, even for private healthcare, it's not law currently. But obviously, you are missing out and alienating a portion of your user base. These regulations, like at some point, they may well be law as well, especially like in regulated industries. So yeah, it's super important. And as I said before, accessibility is usability. So if your product isn't good for accessibility, it probably has usability issues as well, which are going to be affecting 100% of your customers.
Absolutely. And don't forget, everyone in the audience, we're talking about 15 to 20% of the market, like the population, that have some sort of accessibility needs from you, right? They have requirements. So in a way, you are missing on 20% of the market, and you don't want that. And of course, there is also, like, as you said in your slides, where you can talk about being exclusive when we don't include all of the customer base as someone who can actually consume our website. So absolutely. And yeah, Noam is here answering this question and say they're waiting until the regulation will force them. Yeah, probably this will happen as well.
Yeah.
Amanda is very short on time, but we are going to ask another question. Can we ask multiple questions? Yes, you did, Amanda. What should we actually be measuring if we're talking about KPIs to show our bosses that our accessibility work is paying off?
That's a great
Loving that.
That's
That
a
was
really
the
great
right
question.
question to close this session with.
I'm not sure I have a good answer, to be honest. Like
I trust you. I
the
trust you to do amazingly.
the most so usually when you're measuring accessibility, you're doing that just by using the audit. But that obviously doesn't necessarily equate to financial benefits for the company. It's just kind of making sure that you've met the guidelines. So
I think
yeah,
lifetime value can be really interesting here, because if we show that we allow people to recognize themselves with the product because they trust the product and they see the product seeing them in a way, so they stick with the product, we can see longer lifetime value, a better, higher long time value, which is great, right? Also, if you can minimize your marketing efforts because more people are talking about your product, maybe because this is a solution they can actually use over the other solutions in the market they can't actually use. Well, if you can cut on marketing budget because of that, because everyone is just talking about your product, this is a good win.
definitely. Two things that have come to mind. So we used to get quite a few reports of our product being clunky. People would say it a lot in our NPS, and it's actually something we started tracking because it was negative sentiment. And so ever since releasing our design system and rolling out more and more and more, we've had less reports of clunkiness, which is great. And then I think when it comes to financials, so larger customers often do need to prove that their products are accessible before they purchase. This is especially in SaaS. So again, as you start to move into bigger and bigger, you start to win bigger and bigger customers, they will definitely be asking for accessibility. It's something that they'll be reviewing as part of the RFP process. And if you have a competitor out there that's doing a better job than you or passing those guidelines when you're not, then that does put you at a disadvantage. So yeah, I think those are the only things I can think of off the top of my head.
Absolutely loving that. Thank you so much for everything you shared with us, and all the great tips and know-how that you share with our community. This is one of the sessions where I'm proud to have this floor, to have this platform, to bring the knowledge to the audience, because seriously, this is something that matters
Definitely.
so much. You can actually change someone's day, allowing them to feel recognized, to feel seen, and to actually allow them to use your product, which is your goal to begin with, right?
Exactly.
So just do that. So thank you so much, Shakira Damji, for everything that you shared with us today. Can't wait to have you again on our floor to learn even more from you. And that's it, everyone. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for submitting your questions. Bye
Thank
bye,
you.
Leaguers.
Thank you so much. Thanks.